And I'm back in the tub. But I have notes. Hey Derek, so as part of your smattering email, I decided to cobble together this sort of Frankenstein of a video. It's going to come to you in 3 parts. Part 1, response. The last video you sent me, you asked about how one would come at oration from the perspective of a linguist. We did not cover oration or public speaking. I'm sure that in a more advanced class we would have, considering the amount of material we covered. It was going to get there eventually. But the term ended, and I don't really know, so I'm left with my best guess, and that guess is this. Human beings are designed to acquire language, and we are designed for pattern recognition. I don't actually know if those two are linked. Maybe it's the same thing working in 2 different ways, or maybe it's 2 different parts of our brain working in the same way. But pattern recognition and language acquisition are something we do every single day. It's integral to being a person, being a human being. So, if we look at oration, obviously there's the language part going on. But because of pattern recognition and because of the way our brains recognize language, there's actually more than one kind of language. For instance, there's sign language. Sign language does not make use of the voice, and yet it is a language. There's a video, which I will try to link you to in the email, of how Italians have actually developed this sort of shorthand version of sign language, gestures like this, that everyone just knows what they mean and they know how to use them. So human beings can react to multiple kinds of languages. So an orator is not just using his words. He's using his voice, his tone, his body language, the setting for the speech. Is it out in public? Is it on the street in ancient Greece? Is it on a YouTube channel? These are the kinds of linguistic notes you'd want to start looking at. It's just scratching the surface, but it's somewhere to start. Number 2, or part 2 rather, recap. Over the last couple times we've hung out, we've discussed some things in person that I was planning to save for a video. So for the sake of posterity, I'm just going to rattle them off and mention them. Number 1, how can adults learn language like children? In the absence of immersion education, and in the absence of brain plasticity, which includes the language acquisition device, first language acquisition, latent learning, and all that, I'm a believer that introducing a massive amount of code switching on a huge level could in some way replace going through prepubescent early childhood development. It's a broad theory. It's not efficient. It would take a lot of time. And unless you have robots everywhere, you're probably not going to be able to get everyone in your life to start code switching with you. But I'm discussing theory. And however we apply this theory, I believe that it's possible. And the reason I believe it's possible is that we already do it. The English language is a bastard language, and I'm sure you know several words from other languages just because of their popular use. Ay caramba. I'm not going to rattle them all off, but you get what I'm saying. We already pick up different words. We know all these different words for bathroom. Why do we know them? Because of all this experience with asking for the bathroom. In movies, in person, in books, the loo, the commode, the head, el baño, the water closet. That's kind of a form of code switching across dialect as opposed to across language, but I think the same thing could apply. If you had the 5 people you talk to the most changing between English and French, I think that given enough time, it might be years, but you'd pick it up with no effort. That's my first theory. The second thing we talked about in person, the hero's journey versus the heroine's journey. So to recap, the hero's journey, classic hero with 1,000 faces, Bruce Campbell, Star Wars, all that great stuff. The mystic hermit, the call to action, the refusal, hiding in the enemy's skin, returning to become the master of 2 worlds. Compared to that, the heroine's journey, the focus is on getting a home, the focus is on preserving family, the focus is on non-violence. There may be violence in the story, but it's about community and healing. The Hobbit is a perfect example of a heroine's journey compared to The Lord of the Rings, which is the hero's journey. I'm including in this email a link to the TED Talk that initially got me started on this, and I think there's a lot more to talk about. I liked your suggestion that there are some stories that can do both, like the Iliad and the Odyssey. I hadn't thought about that, and I think you're absolutely right. That's a story that goes completely full circle and goes through both realms. Recap number 3, science. So I was telling you how much I love science, how much I love the scientific method. There have been 3 times in my life when I've actually used the scientific method and benefited from it. The first time was in my math class, my first term math class. It was a logic class, and that meant that rather than discussing calculus, algebra, anything like that, we were basically discussing the origin of binary. These were long-form logic problems that used basically yes or no's, ones or zeros. They were very simple, and although I did well in the class, I didn't feel particularly gifted at it. It was hard for me to grasp. But what I enjoyed was that seeing these patterns come out. The universe is not digital. The universe is analog. But this was basically digitizing thought. The logic problem basically in its truest form. This thing can either be true or not true. A computer can be on or it can be off. You can have a 1, which is something, or a 0, which is nothing. Watching these patterns unfold, watching these problems, it was the first time I ever understood those long, the guy in the movie, he's in the insane asylum and he's got this long thing going on, and all of a sudden I got it. It wasn't outside the realm of my understanding for the first time. It was an incredibly complicated logic problem that was just checking and balancing itself to see where it landed, and boom, you get light speed. That was a really exhilarating experience for me. The second time this happened was in my astronomy class, where we had to recreate the experiment that proved that Copernicus was right and Ptolemy was wrong, that the Earth revolved around the sun and not the other way around. Now, we know this. We've grown up knowing it. When you grow up knowing something, you don't have to prove it. So, I just took it for granted. Of course the Earth revolves around the sun. They didn't know that back then, but we know that now. Why would I even question that? And then I did this experiment. And it was an experiment that involved tracking sunlight hitting other planets if the sun was revolving around the Earth, if the sun was doing this. And what I found was you would never see light on Venus. I forget exactly why this was, but if the sun revolved around the Earth, you'd never see Venus in the night sky. I all of a sudden realized, holy shit, it is impossible for the sun to revolve around the Earth. It's not just wrong, it's not incorrect, it's impossible. I had this proof in front of me, and I had done it. I hadn't invented the experiment, but I had, with an open mind, discovered that I could prove whether or not this was possible. It was incredibly exhilarating and freeing, and I realized that if you're a scientist, if you get to experience that on a regular basis, even if it's a tiny discovery, even if you're writing a paper just to keep your tenure at a university, there's kind of a thrill in seeing something. The data doesn't lie. I like that a lot. The data doesn't lie. Maybe data and dogs are the only 2 things in the world that don't lie. So I got kind of sentimental about it. The third example I'm not going to tell you about. I'm going to show you in the email. I have attached 3 of the projects I had to do for my language class. Please feel free to read all of them, or half of them, or only a page. They're not long. And in each project, I had to analyze linguistic data. It's not anything hardcore. I was a rank amateur. But the teacher seemed to like what I did. And it gives you a peek into maybe a looser science, something a little more connected to sociology and psychology. And then there's, the unknowns about the language acquisition device. I had to chart that. I had to take people's speech, and I had to analyze it critically, scientifically, and I had a lot of fun doing that. So check those out. They're going to be attached to the email. Now let me see. I'm also attaching in this email, we got the TED Talk from the hero versus heroine journey, the article from Star Wars about George Lucas writing the perfect prequel trilogy. I've got a 360-degree video in here. And then there are a couple articles I thought you'd appreciate. little descriptions in the email, and then we've got the 3 language projects. Okay. So now we're moving on to the third and final part. So the first part was response. The second part was recap. And the third part is Rego. That's not a real word. It's something I made up. Rego is short for super ego, because I wanted to be cute and have recap, response, Rego. I'm just trying to be silly. Super ego. I have been watching interviews, speeches, videos, and reading articles by a Slovenian philosopher named Slavoj Žižek. I am certain that I am spelling his name incorrectly. I will give a link to something he does in the email. Slavoj Žižek is the personification of the phrase, "It's so crazy, it just might work." He is a Marxist, anti-capitalist, hedonist materialist, cinephile psychoanalyst. He combines communism, psychoanalysis, materialistic hedonism, and a love of the cinema to create his philosophy. I listen to his stuff, and I struggle to understand it, and then I think, I don't agree with what he's saying, but I can't find the hole in the argument. He's right! How did this happen? I've been attempting to listen to philosophers who are not Western to expand my mind a little bit. And one thing that Žižek talks about a lot is he talks about the id, the ego, and the superego because he's a psychoanalyst. The superego, of course, being our conscience. And he talks about how, rather than trying to overcome certain habits, we can skirt around the habits by paying tribute to the superego. Our conscience tells us we have to do this one thing. We pay tribute to it in the tiniest way, we get it out of the way, and we're done. So, taking a page out of that, I'm going to pay tribute to my id. This is really hard. These videos are hard to put together. I have to come up with something, I have to write it down, and then I have to record it, and there's no lighting, because setting up the lighting equipment is hard, and the videos are long, because editing videos are hard, and I don't want to do hard things right now. I'm tired, and I just want to lay down. But this is all really hard, and you know what? Life is hard too. I don't like my job. I don't want to go back to school. I don't want to be poor right now, but I also don't want to start going to work and earning more money. I want to just go to sleep in this little bubble, and I want my dreams to become movies that keep the world entertained. And then I want to wake up every once in a while and have some Chinese food, and have sex with my girlfriend, and play with my dogs, and go for a walk, and then I want to go back to sleep. That's what I want! And I need to whine about it so I can pay tribute to my id, because none of this is easy. And I'm getting tired of pretending that it is. When I'm out in the world, I have to pretend it's easy. But between you and me, I don't need to pretend. It's hard. And now, I'm going to wind that down with paying a tiny bit of tribute to my superego. Because there is a part of me that believes that I deserve to fail if I don't have self-motivation. So I'm going to pay tribute to that by seeing if I can hack the system. I'm going to keep making these videos. I am determined to do that. Ergo, I have self-determination, I have motivation, and I don't deserve to be punished. So whatever I put out there satisfies the need. Please enjoy the links. I hope you enjoyed the video. I know it was a long video, almost 15 minutes, but consider it the equivalent of 3 videos smashed into one. Derek, I will see you very soon. Ciao.